Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cooke, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more. Hi, and welcome today. I'm Rachel Cooke, the COO of Brandon Hall Group and our host of Excellence at Work podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about team effectiveness and really kind of diving into the subject. With me today, I am looking forward to our conversation. We have Lara Gibbs and Tamarah Saif from Gallagher. Tamarah, can you please share a little bit about your background? For those of you that may not know her, she's the National Managing Director in People Development and Insights. Welcome to our chat today.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for having me and Lara here today. A little bit about my background. Yes, so I'm at Gallagher, and I'm the U.S. People Development and Insights Practice Leader. I've spent over 25 years in HR and consulting. Actually started my career as a strategy consultant and moved into the human capital and talent consulting, became an internal HR executive at a variety of companies and a variety of industries. So I've seen a lot of things. I have worked with and partnered with a lot of different types of teams, whether it's teams in manufacturing or teams that are tech-based teams. And, I like to say, the biggest thing that I've learned working in consulting and internally in HR is that people really are truly the heart of every business challenge and also every business success. So I'm super excited to talk about this topic today and what we do in the talent business line and the practices that Lara and I lead. And just so you all know, Gallagher is a global insurance risk management and consulting company, and we are part of the Gallagher Benefit Services group, which advises, designs, implements, manages benefits, financial, and talent solutions for organizations around the world. So it's pretty cool work that we do. We like to think of ourselves as our client's holistic people strategy partner. And with that, I think I'm handing it over to Lara to introduce herself.
Thank you, Tamarah. So yes, my name is Lara Gibbs, and I am the National Practice Leader of People Development and Insights in Canada. So Tamarah and I work very closely from a North American perspective. I've also been in the field just a little over 25 years. Time flies when you're having fun, that's for sure. I shock myself when I hear how long. And I've mostly been on the talent side of things, having only recently moved into consulting, but we definitely have breadth and depth of experience on the client side. Like Tamarah, working in a multitude of different industries and sectors, worked in many different types of teams, from startups to fully established, well-oiled machines. And I've also had some global experience. I've been very fortunate in my career and some of the wonderful opportunities and meeting different people and of course, working in different teams as well.
Well, thank you, Lara, and thank you, Tamarah, for sharing a little bit about your background and as well as Gallagher. We've been doing a lot of research around team dynamics, team effectiveness, team performance over the years. And I remember when we, probably about 10 years ago, when we started looking at team dynamics as it relates to the learning function or to HR and who's responsible for it. And what types of effects does team dynamics have on the organization, especially when we asked HR learning leaders, is it a priority of yours? And a lot of them had shared that they realize that it's important, but oftentimes don't prioritize around it based on the competing priorities. And though I see a little bit of a shift over the years, especially the way that through technology and through globalization and through the way that we work today is drastically changing, and how we connect with others and the accessibility to do so. And with that does drive some opportunities, great opportunities, but also complications, and right, understanding different personalities, different geographies, different cultures. This is like an evolving area, and it's really exciting to see kind of how it's continuously changing and the impact that we can have when developing teams or selecting the right teams together, and providing them the tools to excel. So from your perspective and the work that you're doing, what are the foundations of team effectiveness?
Yeah, I'll have to go with this, Rachel. You know, set the stage so well, and there's so many variables, and this is the key. And I'll reference what Tamarah said earlier about the heart of the organization. People are the heart and the powerhouse. And then when you're dealing with personalities and the tech and the globalization and all the multitude of variables externally, and then you're looking at people, everybody being different personalities, different skill sets, and the variables are endless. So it is very important to have methodology and a way to really unpack everything, understand it, and make sure that we do bring the right teams together and support and provide the tools to our teams to ensure that we can be highly impactful and high performing. So, you know, even more for all the reasons you stated, Rachel, team effectiveness is really critical in today's dynamic workplace. Some of the other things that we're looking at as organizations face constant change and increasing complexity is that need for agility and innovation in collaboration. So teams therefore must adapt quickly in these shifting markets, the shifting technologies, the rate at which technology is increasing day by day. Organizations need to be ready for that and need to be able to get in front of that. And as I mentioned, teams need to be able to adapt quickly to keep up with these things. Some of our current complexities also include, you know, the tariff struggles. That's a global, that has global impact. When we're looking at people, we're looking at an aging workforce, right? The baby boomers are now starting to go into retirement, and those successors for the aging retirement, that next layer of leaders, in some cases aren't necessarily ready to take over the reins. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is the expectations of emerging leaders, in some cases, are misaligned to the expectations of the organization. And the culture of the organization as well. So a lot of dynamics there, as you mentioned. So what does that mean? It means that we really do have to cultivate leadership at every level of the organization. And we talk about leaders taking ownership and responsibility for themselves, accountability. And we talk about distributed leadership now as well. So that's you know, delegating, and depending on skill and expertise and experience, different people can step in at different times, depending on what the need is, in order to support the dynamic environment. And if we have that kind of approach to leadership, that fosters agility and deeper engagement across teams. So what does all that mean? Again, it's the rationale and the reason behind why it is so important to have high performing teams and to be able to give the tools to support that.
Absolutely. And talking about tools or building high performing team behaviors, should we, you know, how do, you know, we've seen when organizations get started, sometimes it's through some type of assessment or some type of activity, but how do we build that structure, or how do we build that framework or that foundation?
Absolutely. So this is what we work with quite frequently with our clients. We might have a client come in and say, okay, I have this fantastic team, but it's a new team. We've gone through a lot of change over the last X number of years, or it could be that it's a startup, or it could be new leadership. So from any time you have a team and you change one component on that team, in essence, you have a brand new team, right? So where do we start from? So we assess, as you said, we might do an assessment, usually start with an assessment to understand where we are. And we will use psychometric tools with our clients, Success Finder, Hogan, DISC. So there are any number of assessment tools specifically designed to understand the makeup, characteristics, leadership styles, profiles of individuals. And then when you look at aggregate data of these, this is where you are able to pinpoint the makeup and get that data on the team and the dynamics of the team and how they can play a strategic, multifaceted role in enhancing team effectiveness, especially in high-performing teams. So some of the things that are identified with tools and psychometric tools, individuals can be more self-aware, right? You can also see as a team, as a group, how effective they are together. You can then look at where there's mutual understanding. It helps with alleviating misinterpretation of interpersonal friction. It encourages appreciation of diverse working styles. Some of these tools can also support role clarity within our teams and look at the team composition, which then feeds into succession planning, right? So because you're identifying your potential leaders, you're identifying where there are potential gaps. You can look at the mix of cognitive styles and make sure there's a good blend there. When we're looking at cognitive styles, we're looking at how people make decisions, various approaches to decision making, and those, again, interpersonal dynamics. It also facilitates constructive communication, right? Psychometric insights can help tailor communication approaches, by understanding, Rachel likes to communicate this way, or Tamarah communicates in this way. And it's that self-awareness and understanding of others, which then improves conflict resolution, right? Because you're understanding the underlying personality drivers. And, we're going to talk a little bit about psychological safety. We hear a lot about this, but these tools can uncover and validate these different perspectives, right? And of course, the big one here, when we do psychometric assessments, we can see how the teams work together and how best they can work together. But we can also look at and pinpoint leadership development for these performing teams, right? So we can identify what the potential areas are and also the derailers, what as a team is impacting the team. Because we can then look at top 3 specifically, bottom 3 specifically when we're looking at team dynamics, and then come up with a plan to address some of those derailers. And of course, all of this strengthens cohesion and trust with the teams. And we're looking more at transparency within the team. And of course, all this promotes openness and vulnerability and even more trust building because now you have a shared language and understanding within the team. So there's so much these tools unearth, and then you come up with a plan to address some of the findings from these assessment tools.
I always find it so fascinating when you go through these exercises, whether I've seen it through our clients or ourselves in, past teams that I was on. And they all drive this kind of vulnerability or eye-opening experiences where you really get to learn about each other. And there's always a surprise, right? There's always, or sometimes even people are surprised by their own responses or their own triggers or their own feedback based on others. That's always interesting too, right? Whether it's a peer or a subordinate or a manager, that's always fascinating. And it really does help create these environments and drive that psychological safety. Tamarah, is there anything that you'd like to share based on leveraging diversity and strategic alignment? That's an important part as we look at globalization and where teams are forming, and of course, whether it's culture, ethnicity, multi-generations in the workplace. There's so many different complexities and diversities that we have. Then how do we ensure that we are creating these environments that are these cultures and these environments that are inclusive?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take that. Here's what we have to think about is inclusive teams foster psychological safety and belonging. And the work that I've done over many years, what I've realized is that a sense of belonging and the sense of psychological safety is of utmost importance to building a much more cohesive team that is able to innovate and grow together. So if I, kind of think about what makes a high performing team, trust really is the cornerstone. Go back to trust. We talked a little bit about vulnerability. And so it's not about just a superficial type of trust. This is about letting people inside. And that's really difficult. It's difficult for myself. And I have to think about that every time I go into a team meeting and just making sure that I can put myself out there. Because if I don't do it, if I don't model the behavior as a leader, then I can't expect other folks within the team, whether it's my team or if it's a team that I'm a part of, to have that same type of behavior. I would go, like I said, go to trust. It's the kind of trust that allows a team member to say, I don't know, or I made a mistake without fear. And that goes to psychological safety. And like I said, when leaders model that kind of openness and create an environment of psychological safety, it really does create what I consider a ripple effect across the team. And if we think about, psychological safety, it's creating environments for open dialogue. So people can speak up, they can ask questions, they can challenge ideas. And when you challenge ideas without fear, that's when innovation happens. It's essential for folks to learn about each other, learn about just what they're talking about, but it can spark creativity because you're not just looking at one person's perspective of what's going on. And you can easily get this done. Okay, so maybe not so easily, but be curious. It takes being curious. It takes active listening. And it also takes responding with empathy. And that's across the board, not just leaders. So to create an inclusive environment, you have to have an environment where there is trust, vulnerable trust. You have to have an environment where you have created a sense of psychological safety so people can speak up. And I have to bring in the concept of conflict here as well, because if there's no conflict on your team, quite frankly, that means something is wrong. That means you are not getting the most out of your team. You're likely not innovating. You're likely not growing. You have to have those foundational pieces. And that is really what inclusion is about. Your teams have to feel like they can take risk as well. So setting up that environment means that taking a risk is okay. And that also means if you fail when you take that risk, it's okay. And so you're really creating an environment that says, it's okay to be you. It's okay to speak up. And we want all of your ideas. We want people to feel like they belong so that the unlock can happen, the unlock to a high performing team.
It's definitely interesting. And especially when there's, different exercises and or workshops around bias or unconscious bias. And there's a lot of controversy from psychologists whether or not you could really change those biases. However, I think the research, kind of shows that you can change bias, not instantaneous, but even from my own experience and being part of some of these very simple, it could be words that are being used or different point of views of different areas around the world that you may think that are may only have, let's say, sunshine or very simple things, but those are biases that
Mm-hmm.
you were brought up to believe.
Yep.
However, going through different awareness and different experiences and different, whether it's really short development opportunities or longer term, experiences and working on with different teams and dynamics, it does change your bias, I think, over time, because first you raise awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then through awareness and then through reinforcement of that awareness, it does, I believe, will change your bias. So I think some of that research needs to be rewritten about some of those psychologists that were pretty firm about it probably a decade or two ago or even longer. But yeah, going back to vulnerability, what you said, Tamara, that's also key to really kind of building that trust. But it is hard because you don't know how vulnerable you want to be at times, or especially in the workplace and it could even be personal. How much do you want to share, or what is appropriate to share in a certain setting is a little bit different. So I think just, creating more opportunities and putting yourself out there will help, in being that kind of role model. From our experience in some of our events, especially the ones that we had around women in leadership and diversity inclusion, where they're more intimate settings rather than our larger annual excellence conference. I always start off with, share a little bit about your background and something that has been part of your experience for making you a great leader, or some of the challenges. And the presenters and those that were involved, and even in the audience, they all loved sharing because it was such a empowering group. And they've all, had success, had experienced success at a certain level, some more than others. But in doing so, they all achieved challenges along the way. There was not one that had not, and then oftentimes we're able to share that in a story that was kind of revealing, sometimes funny, sometimes not funny. So just kind of, making it safe to kind of exchange that information. So we have our Women in Leadership Summit, which we hadn't had in a while, coming up in November. So we'll have to talk after this. I would love for your team to be part of it. And it's in November. Going back to impact and structure, how do we make sure that what we are building here, what's the foundation, and then how do we measure that there is impact, that we are driving certain goals and we're able to report on those goals for decision making?
I can start off on this one. So the impact of having these powerful teams, it's empowered teams. I would have to say empowered, not powerful, empowered teams. And it's empowered leadership at all levels. So everyone within the team. And the impact is, if the team is supported with the right development tools. So we talked about assessments and basically understanding yourself, understanding how you interact with other people, but also data-informed insights. So part of our practices actually is around data and insights, which is really cool. And we see leadership emerge at every level, not just at the top. And those that are driving performance and modeling accountability, those are the type of leaders that we need. And so as we look at impact, we're looking at operational efficiency. So an organization is going to have better operational efficiency through better communication, because these leaders, the folks on the team, they understand each other. They know how to talk to each other in a better way. They are aware of their biases and maybe even changing, to your point, right? They're changing the way that they look at things, so they don't even have the bias anymore. And when teams have the clarity in expectations and they have set goals, so I think that's a key point here, is that the teams have goals and metrics that they can follow. They have shared scorecards. They have KPIs. That's part of, kind of getting to this high performing team that you want in an organization. They should be results oriented. And in order to be results oriented, it's really helpful to have specific goals and expectations. It's also really helpful just to have some more specific role clarities, just to understand how your role plays within the whole team, how your role is going to have an impact on the team, on the organization, on meeting those goals. So we're going to get better operational efficiency. And, we certainly hope that we can have a culture. So you're building a culture as you're building this high performing team. So a sustainable culture. And that is going to support retention of your people on that team. And, it's a sustainable culture is really built on, go back to that word, trust. It's built on inclusion, and it's also built on purpose. So you take those goals, the expectations, there is a reason that you're doing this. You're not just on the team and doing work because that's what you're paid to do. There's a reason that you're doing it. You have a purpose, and that's going to be your competitive advantage. So when I think about impact, I think about how these high performing teams can be so much of a competitive advantage, especially in today's market. As Lara was talking about earlier, just the agility that's needed today because of the perpetual disruption that we're living in. That's, having these teams is paramount to business growth. And that's the impact. It's going to be growth. And certainly we are all people in the talent business here on this call. It's also about growth and development for the humans involved as well. We can't forget that, and making sure that they have a path forward in their careers in the organization.
It's, in creating that team charter and that foundation, that blueprint, that's kind of like the pillar, right? The foundation. And then you're going to have subsets of that for different team programs or team effectiveness priorities. But also, I would recommend that you don't wait until there's a problem. You don't wait until you see a decline in performance or a decline in production. Some industries are even more critical, let's say in the airlines or in healthcare, where your decisions and your ability to work with each other can be life or death threatening, or can impact major decisions. So you really want to wait. And in these industries, even them have their challenges. However, you don't want to be in a position where you're having to respond based on these types of outcomes. You really want to kind of be in front of it, and you want to make sure that it is part of your talent, it is part of your learning strategy, just as much as you're developing your leaders, which tends to be the first sometimes priority. Though through technology, we're seeing a lot more opportunities that make learning available to everyone. So that's great to see. But I do think how we track it and how we're measuring the success and the we need to focus on that.
Most definitely. And just quickly, Rachel, you talked about the team charter, and Tamarah's in the context of, the goal, setting those goals and the shared accountability. The team charter definitely, as you say, it's something that has to happen up front. It's that shared agreement, right? That accountability for yourself and for others. It's the team charter is usually co-created, right? It's the foundation that can align the diverse strengths and expectations and goals. You explore and express what the shared values are going to be, what the norms are, and then confirm what the expectations are. You're engaging the team in defining those principles, and then you set those measurable action items, as you both have said, so that it's clear, it's trackable, you're committed to it, and then you're also looking at the diverse contributions across the team to meet those goals, and of course align with the organizational objectives. Everybody's in alignment with what each other's doing, with what you're doing individually to contribute, and it's aligned to what the organization's strategic goals are. So I just wanted to add a little bit more there to the
Absolutely.
charter.
I can agree more. It's a critical in really making sure that it's you're continuing to drive and continuing to be able to implement it throughout the organization and not just in pockets.
Right.
And usually, sometimes a manager will say, we need some kind of team program here because for whatever reason it's dysfunctional, or something's not working, or they're not selling enough of the products, or there may be certain manufacturing at risk, or but if you have that team charter in place and you have your defined strategy and what you want to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
then you can react to certain issues that do come up, but it's not just in a pocket. You can integrate it and also see if this approach works well here. We may want to implement it over in this area, even though there is not an issue, but we can help prevent an issue from occurring. And just continuing to cascade that throughout. Well, we've seen for team effectiveness and team development to be as optimized and effective, that this is paramount for that.
Absolutely.
And as we're kind of wrapping up our chat today, are there any other call to actions or points that you want to make on, advising others depending on where they are in their journey?
Sure. I mean, I'll give a couple, and then I'll hand over to Tamarah. But I think, some of the common themes, we're hearing and seeing with our clients, and also advice that we give, as a leader, it starts with that self-awareness, right? Understanding yourself so that you can be aware of others as a foundation is key. As a leader, to be empathetic, you need to tune into your emotions and perspectives of others. Being that vulnerable, authentic leader, practice humility, embrace authenticity and transparency. These are all human-centered characteristics. Tamarah mentioned that earlier about being human. And this, in turn, creates that space for others to contribute and shine. So that's for me the foundation of that self-awareness and being that authentic human leader, creating that space for the team to shine. And Tamarah,
thanks for that, Lara. So I agree with everything you said, and I think as I think about our conversation today and team effectiveness and what is coming to us from our clients and what our clients are experiencing. Obviously, world is changing ever fast, and the organizations are trying to figure out how to make changes to operating models, how people actually do work as well. And so they have to have these aligned and more agile teams, because those teams can become the growth engine for those organizations. But the teams really have to adapt to change. They have to execute strategy. They have to innovate even faster today. And it doesn't mean big innovations. It could be something super small, just maybe a small way that they do work differently that makes that team more effective. But that's critical in today's environment. So, the point I would leave you with is that the impact of effective teams can be felt across every layer of an organization, but also the opposite happens. So if your team isn't effective, then think about what's happening within the rest of the organization as the impact of ineffective teams. So creating those effective teams is key, and it's key, it's critical, and it doesn't happen by chance, as we've talked about today. It is built with intention, and in this world of disruption, teams are not just the greatest asset. We hear that a lot, but it's literally, I believe, your greatest lever for change and growth. And so as I think about it, how do you build your team to thrive and not just survive? And I've seen this time and time again with teams that I've been on, with client teams. They're trying to survive, but that's not how we want to be. That's not how we should. We need to be building teams to actually thrive. And hopefully we gave some really salient pointers on how that can be done.
Absolutely. You kind of made me think a little bit about raising children in a family. You can't just expect them to thrive without any nurturing and without any boundaries and setting of expectations and continuous conversations of what right and wrong is and how you should talk to each other as siblings. And oftentimes it may not feel like you're getting your message across. However, I think with adults, we have a little bit higher success in but yeah, we're all humans, right? And we all, I think we all revert back to certain behaviors that are based of our characteristics, but those behaviors can be modified, through awareness, through also setting expectations, especially during the recruiting process. Team dynamics and these assessment tools can be really powerful by, selecting the right people on your team and making sure in doing so you are setting those clear objectives and standards and what type of culture your organization is and what the goals are so that you're forming at the very beginning a team that has a greater success rate than just again hoping that it works out. We can go on, right? But this has been really great, and I enjoyed connecting with both of you today, and I really am appreciative of both of your perspectives. And also, if our audience would like to connect with you, what is the best way to reach you to learn more about some of the programs that you offer? And again, how can they connect with you?
Sure, that would be great, and also thank you for your time as well, Rachel. It's a lovely conversation. Email is the best, so first name _ last name, so Lara, Lara _ Gibbs, Gibbs @ajg.com.
And same for me as well. Email is certainly the best way you can reach me. And again, first name _ last name @ajg.com. So that's Tamarah, TAMARAH _ Saif, SAIF @agg.com. So please feel free to reach out at any point. We love helping organizations build the best people, infrastructure, and teams possible to succeed in today's fast-changing world.
Thank you, Tamarah. Thank you, Lara. And again, thank you all for joining us today. Take care.
Thank
you,
you.
Rachel.
Bye-bye.